Hi guys, Nada here, and today's review is all about this handsome Itx case, the Cooler Master H100. So it belongs to the H series, and yeah, it looks exactly like somebody just cropped an H500, which is a good thing in my opinion because I actually like that design. Either way, it is an eye catcher with this 200mm RGB fan in the front. Now, it is not the smallest of Itx cases, but it's very practical. You can cram a small gaming system inside and just drag it around LAN parties if you wish. And it's also very affordable. It comes in at 65 euros here in Europe. Now, that all sounds very good, but let's see what you get for that price, and more importantly, let's see how this case performs. Let's go. This video is brought to you by the MSI GS75 Stealth, an ultra-thin 17-inch gaming laptop that combines a sleek design with a ton of power. It comes with Intel's latest processors, 144Hz IPS panel, and high-end GPU options for that great gaming experience. Get yours using the links in the description below. As I mentioned before, the H100 has a very familiar design. Front panel is fine steel mesh, and behind it is a 200mm RGB fan that gives the case its characteristic look by covering the entire front panel. Top panel is also fine mesh, while both side panels are completely closed. On the top we find an I/O panel that has a power button, reset button, 2 USB 3 Type A connection, as well as 2 audio connections. In the back of the top panel there is a built-in handle that makes this case very easy to drag around. The case is very light, weighing only 2.5 kilos, so it's perfect for that mobile gaming rig you always wanted to have. Even though it's so light, the overall quality of the case is quite decent for a case of this size and price range. And the finish is quite good too, with no visible gaps. This case is pretty spacious for an MITX case. It is pretty straightforward, and it's actually pretty easy and smooth to work with, which is usually not the case when working with small form factor cases. You literally build it like any other case, then slide the power supply in over the motherboard and above the GPU. Now, this positioning limits the size of the CPU cooler you can use. Maximum height of an air cooler is 83mm, but I would make sure you don't hit the top mark, as you do want your top-down cooler to have some breathing space. Now, this case should fit a single fan water cooler in the front with 120 or 140mm rad, but it just seems more like an air-cooled case. The front 200mm RGB fan you can control via your motherboard if you can, and if you cannot, Cooler Master has you covered by adding an optional simple RGB controller. This case fits GPUs up to 210mm in length, a bit less if you somehow manage to cram water cooling in, and 2.5 PCIe slots in thickness. When it comes to power supplies, it actually fits a full-size ATX power supply. I would recommend getting a modular or a semi-modular one to avoid dealing with extra cables you don't need. Storage-wise, you can fit two 2.5-inch drives on the bottom, and there is also a drive bracket mounted right behind the left side panel for easy access that fits 2 more 2.5-inch drives. You can also swap the 2 bottom ones for 1 mechanical hard drive. That is a decent amount of storage for an ITX case. So let's talk about the build that I have here, and I have to say this is the first Zen 2 computer that we built since it came out. I'm just going to tell you what's inside because I don't think you're going to be able to see from my glorious cable management. I'll do some B-rolls to make sure you can visually as well see what's inside. So there is an Aorus X570 Pro ITX motherboard. In there we have Ryzen 7 3700X. Cooling that processor, we have Noctua's low-profile cooler, the NHL9A. It is a very tiny cooler, top-down cooler. There is only 37mm in height. We have 16GB here of G.Skill Flare X memory that runs at 3200 MHz, and you can actually see the GPU. So this is a Gigabyte RTX 2060 mini ITX graphics card. So it's a nice little gaming system. For a power supply, which is pretty obvious, we have Cooler Master V750, and before you start raging that that's an overkill, I just have to say that is the only modular Cooler Master power supply I could find in the office at the moment, so that's what I have. For storage, I have the Samsung Evo Plus M.2 SSD, which is mounted behind the motherboard. So let's put this system to the test and see how it actually performs. So in idle, what's important is that the case is pretty quiet. It is standing at 36.2 decibels, which is not completely inaudible, but it is fairly quiet for a case and it shouldn't bother anyone. CPU is standing at 43 Celsius and GPU at 38 Celsius, which is all very good. Now, while gaming, the GPU went up to 70 degrees Celsius, the CPU up to 71 degrees Celsius, and there was 53 Celsius on the VRMs, which means the system isn't having any problems. You can easily run this setup for any type of gaming with no concern about temperatures. I did put a case fan at 100% for this, so now it's measuring 41.5 decibels. So you can hear it, but I still wouldn't call it loud. The upside of having one large fan like this is that even at audible levels, you hear more of a deep hum rather than a high-pitched sound that the smaller fans usually make. So far so good, but when I put the Ryzen 7 3700X under heavy load in Blender, you do see the CPU temperature starting to become a problem and going over 90 degrees. Now the problem here is also a small CPU block on such a strong processor, and there is not much more H100 can do for this system because when we tested it outside, it was also struggling. So the fact that this setup was keeping up with the CPU when all cores are running at 4 GHz, even though it was at 90 degrees stable, it is clear that the problem could be solved by just adding a stronger CPU cooler or using a processor that is not as strong, like Ryzen 5 for example. Like any other Itx case, the H100 has its limitations, and in this case it is actually CPU cooling, probably because of lack of space. So if you're gonna make that system that is just for creating content and rendering all day or doing anything that is super CPU heavy, then there are better options out there. That being said, it was keeping up with an 8-core CPU with a very tiny CPU cooler on top of it. It was hot but stable, which means that if you do invest in a better cooler, it's going to do just fine. Would I recommend it for a content creating machine? Probably not, because this case is clearly made for gaming, because when we used it for gaming and anything that is more GPU oriented, it was actually performing really well. So if you're looking for a case for your mobile gaming rig to drag around LAN parties, or just you want to save some space on your desk, then this case is a very decent option. Now, that is it for today. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this review and about this Itx case. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and see you in the next one. Bye!